Hi everyone, welcome back to Jungle Citizens. My name is Alex and this is part 3 of our plant tour, which is mostly ornamental plants, but we keep creeping in a few of the indigenous ones as well. So we're going to start here with a native, but it is an aroid. This is Pothos scandens, and if you can just have a look here, if you come in, there you can see the inflorescence. You see that? Look at that. So the reason why aroids are aroids, it's the Araceae family, is because their flowers have the same form. So what you have is a spathe and a spadix. So you can see this little hood-like thing here, and then you can see this here. So those two things together are what makes an aroid, whether it's a spathiphyllum or a pothos or an epipremnum. Now this is a true pothos. So many of you guys will probably have heard of pothos before because it's the money plant. That is actually reclassified from pothos. It's now epipremnum aureum, I think it is. This is Pothos scandens. This is native to the Western Ghats and Southeast Asia, if I'm not wrong, and it's found in rainforests. Moving on, this is a vanilla. So vanilla is a climbing orchid from Central America, but of course it provides a really important spice that is of high value, and this ecology and environment is really perfect to grow it. So we have it growing in a few places. It's also very beautiful. Curious thing about this is it must be hand pollinated unless you live in its native range, where there is a particular species of insect that is basically the sole pollinator. And because here in Asia we don't have that insect, it means that we have to do the job of pollination ourselves. Now if we go down here, here you will see Philodendron 69686, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's a very nice plant. It looks a little bit like the Philodendron jupii, but the jupii is a little bit thinner and it has a longer leaf. I planted this out just before the monsoon, so it's still a little baby. I got a couple planted out, but of course everything's going to have to be coming out. And this very beautiful little shingling aroid here is actually a young Pothos scandens. So that same plant I showed you earlier, that's what it looks like when it climbs up the tree, which is very cool. So this is a Cebu blue epipremnum pinnatum. It's actually a plant that you have to be a little bit careful of. So for any of you in tropical areas that are growing, that like to grow aroids, especially some of these epipremnum, the epipremnum pinnatum and epipremnum aureum, the money plants, or the pothos as they used to be called, they can get quite aggressive. There is a rainforest in Sri Lanka near Kandy called Udawathwakele, and a large amount of that forest has literally been eaten up by the money plant, which is destroying the native biodiversity. So we have this one here. We are keeping a very close eye on it, but now anyway we are leaving, so we'll be ripping it out. But nice to show you guys, Cebu blue epipremnum. So this is the entrance of our rainforest biome, and this is an area where there is both plantation and native species. So a few of the kind of natives that we have around us. Here we have a clerodendron. Very beautiful. It has a caramel kind of flower smell. If we look over on the other side, this is, you see with the Latin names, Lagerstromia, there you go, Lagerstromia microcarpa. It's a secondary deciduous species from here, which means that it doesn't grow, it's not able to grow in the most primary of forests, but if there's any kind of damage or degradation, this plant will come up and will act as a kind of a nursery ground for the native trees. This is a superstar plant. This is Lea indica. This is one of our favorites because it has such a huge amount of value for biodiversity. So the flowers produce a lot of nectar, so butterflies, moths, lots of insects, flies, even the sunbirds that we have come. And then the fruits that form are food for the bulbuls, the hornbills, the barbets, and anything else that eats little seeds and fruits. And it is a host plant for many caterpillars. So amazing plant. For those of you that are living in or around these ecosystems, if you see that growing in your garden, keep it, because it actually makes a nice landscaping plant. Yes. So as we walk down here, this is what we call our rainforest biome. So the first thing that you're going to notice in here is that the soil has all been turned over. That's not us, that's the wild boar. So we're inside of a very rich forest area here, and we really work very hard on the soil because it obviously enriches all of the plantation and everything that we grow, whether it's native or non-native, and the wild boar love it. So actually when we arrived in this plantation, the entire area was grass and invasives. There was no real soil that you could see, it was all green. The bananas were very, very small and unhappy, the supari or the areca nut also. The areca nut is this thing, these poles that you're going to see everywhere. They're a palm and they produce a fruit. So basically what happened 2 years ago is all the wild boar would come in and they will eat all of the bananas. Since then we have worked very strongly on our soil, and because of that the soil is full of lots of amazing worms, grubs, lots of roots that are tasty, which means that the wild boar come in and they basically act like a tractor, turn everything up, but they don't take any of the bananas or any of the important plants. So 2 years ago when the boar came, it was like a scene out of a horror story. They would take hundreds of our bananas, and now they leave them be and they just turn over our soil, which is awesome. And why everyone needs to work on their soil, because it's the soil that solves everything. So all of the stuff that you see around, this is all regenerating forest. These are evergreen forest species. This is a Lophopetalum whiteyanum, and this is a syzygium. I think it's Syzygium hemisphericum. So these are evergreen forest trees. They're primary trees, they grow huge, they take a long time to grow, but these ultimately are the species that should be forming this environment. We should be in a forest that has a 30-meter canopy, that is evergreen year-round, and that maintains a huge amount of moisture and humidity in this down area. And of course, as we have done as humans all over the world, we have ended up damaging that a lot. So this is what we do in order to bring it back. So lots and lots of natives that you'll see around the place. But what we're here for today is more of the ornamentals. So we have to tell you guys again, this is not a manicured walk around, this is a working farm, but we want to show you how we have added little things into it. So this, for example, this is a Philodendron sodiroi. Was just planted a couple of months ago, but it's growing really well. Very beautiful. And then this is another one of the Philodendron barosoanums from Ecuagenera. Again, just planted sadly, and just getting itself happy on this areca nut, and it's now going to have to get taken out. But very, very cool plant, extremely good if you have an outdoor growing area. Then as we go over here, here you will see some of our cacaos. These are cacao trees. So these are cacao trees. For any one of you that eats chocolate, this is the ultimate source. Now cacao is a native to South America, but it is a plant that needs shade. So if you are able to grow it, if you have a kind of a shady, moist forest area, this can become quite a decent cash crop. In Goa and in other areas, for example, there is a lot of cashew production or coconut production. This is one of a few species that could be used as an alternative and generate a very good amount of revenue. It's also a very beautiful plant with very big leaves. So what it does is it kind of drops its leaves a little bit when the monsoon ends, and now it's getting new leaves. So this is the best one to show you that. Here you can see, look at that. Very, very cool leaf. And it's worth noting that it's not only the beans, the seeds inside, that you can turn into chocolate, you have to process, but actually the fruit itself comes in two colors, I believe, in yellow and red, and it's super tasty. So this is one of those plants, it doesn't get too big, it stays as an evergreen tree, it gives you shade year round, and it gives you tasty fruit. This guy, it's very easy to walk past plants here because they're everywhere. This is again this Epipremnum amplissimum, and it's still young, it gets really big. And you can see, because we grow them outdoors and in forest environments, there's lots of stuff coming up on the leaves. But also, as you can see, the plant doesn't really care. So there's another shoot coming up here. It's a little bit younger, very nice. So yes, very light colour, very kind of silvery. And then over here we have an Epipremnum pinnatum aurea, something like that. This is the same one that I was telling you have to be a bit careful of if you're in a wet evergreen environment where this is not native. So this is native, I think, to some island areas in Southeast Asia. I can't remember exactly, but do be careful of it, because it can be one of those that will very quickly make a big impact, look very beautiful, and then become an absolute nightmare to manage and maintain. So we're keeping a close eye on it. Now obviously we're going to be taking it out. Beautiful plant, be a little bit careful. And then here we have another Philodendron melanochrysum, again just planted out before the monsoon, so maybe 5 months back, and it's taken on really nicely to this supari or Areca nut. Unfortunately it's obviously going to have to be coming off, which is a real shame. And behind it you have a variegated Philodendron bell marks. We've got these dotted out all over the place. That is another one of these really hardy, robust plants for those of you looking to get started in the aroid world. This is all cacao. As we go around, cacao, cacao, cacao. And then in the second part of this series we told you about Anthurium formosum. This is an Anthurium formosum. It's from a very dear plant collector friend of mine in Bangalore called Ram Prasad. This is a big one. So this one I planted out last year. Oh, was that a Bombay bush frog? I might have just disturbed a Bombay bush frog. This was planted out last year. So the one that you saw inside was a bottom cut, and this is a top cut. And I mean, have a go at that. Let me see if I can get in a little bit more. That is a real monster leaf, and very beautiful. So yeah, look at the flowers as well. Really nice, bright white. I've actually not tried pollinating this before, but I must try at some point, because it's a very beautiful plant. Underrated, I would say. Then here, this is another Epipremnum pinnatum cebu blue. We talked about that one earlier, so we won't dwell on it for too long. As we go over here, this is a currently quite shapeless and Philodendron bipenifolium. I'm going to show you a far nicer one of those, so we won't dwell on that one either. Here we have an Anthurium macrolobium. So if you have a look, you can see now all the roots are exposed, because the wild boar have come in here and have dug up absolutely everything looking for grubs and worms, but they haven't taken the Anthurium. So this is a really important thing, because when I arrived they were all taking the Anthuriums, and in our last place they were doing the same. And here now we've managed to get to the point with the soil where they're leaving all of our plants alone, as you can see. So there's some berries on this one. You can see a whole bunch of flowers, but also some berries coming. I think it must have self-pollinated, because I didn't do it. But it seems to have the same kind of traits of its parent plant. So this is a hybrid. This is not a proper species. It's a hybrid of, I think, Anthurium pedata radiatum and Anthurium clavigerum, but very much like its pedata radiatum lineage, it takes a very long time for the seeds to develop. And then if you look up there, this is a very sort of monsoon mangled Monstera pinnatipartita. We will again show you a nicer one of those, so we don't have to dwell on that. We shall come a little bit further along to here. Here you can get a closer look at the Philodendron squamiferum, crazy furry petiole, and here. So this is also a very robust plant, well worth growing. Oh yes, we have to have a little look in here. If we mind the Lea indica, this is Cercestes mirabilis. This is actually from Africa. It's an African aroid. And over time, as it gets older, it loses the white in its leaves, but actually it grows like crazy. So all of these runners coming everywhere, these are all Cercestes. So maybe this is also one we have to look out for. I will quantify what we are doing by saying that our ornamentals are planted in a very limited area. So we are working on large properties and the ornamentals are planted in a very small area. So for example, this property is actually 150 hectares, and in the entire area we are only planting 6 to 8 hectares as a plantation, in which we are also allowing ourselves to grow these. But as with any environment, you have to be very, very careful not to introduce invasives and keep an eye. This is another one that I'm keeping a little bit of an eye on because it might get to be a handful. Right. So now over here, this is an amazing evergreen forestry. This is Persea macrantha, which I think has now been renamed as Machilus macrantha. It's a very big 30 odd meter evergreen primary forestry from here, and amazing that we had them in the plantation already, because they've proved to be incredible poles, and they're also a very good seed source for us. But if we go down here, we can see again Philodendron squamiferum that you've seen a few times now. This one is a nice one to see. This is Philodendron fibrocataphyllum. So when the leaves are young, they don't have this lobe. The lobe develops as it gets older. Actually, you can see if you just come around the tree a little bit, follow me around here. Because the light is less and because it's shooting, it's actually decided that it's going to take away the lobes, get smaller leaves and focus on going up. So here you can see the kind of more mature leaf shape, and at the top you can see the less mature leaf shape. Now if we go around here, this one again is the Philodendron barosoanum, which we've seen before. That's one of the better ones we have growing out, only just planted. Now if you take a look down here, this is Anthurium pentaphyllum, again only just planted, so it's very small, but that's another one that can get very large with time. So here we have a really fun little section. This is the first Anthurium clavigerum we planted out, again only a few months ago. So it's starting to get a little bit bigger, but it's a long way from its potential. It could get 12, 13, 14 of these leaflets coming out, which is really cool. New leaf is coming there, but it does seem to be getting attacked by something or eaten by something. Now over here, this is Philodendron genevivianum. There you go. This is a fellow fairy petiole philodendron, as you can see, similar to Philodendron squamiferum. Another one is Philodendron serpens, which I don't have at the moment, but would very much like to. Okay, and then we move over to here. This is Anthurium pinklei. Anthurium pinklei from Equigenera. There's a new leaf coming there. So that's been planted for a while, but it's kind of never really got too funky. I don't know if it's too shady for it, not sure. Here we have another young Philodendron bilietiae. You can see lovely new leaf coming. And here, growing up the tree very nicely, but still very small leaves because it's such a shady environment, you have, again, Philodendron melanochrysum. And what you can't see is the tiniest little gecko just there, but you'll have to take my word for it. It's an endemic called, oh, I can't remember the name, something goaensis, I'll tell you later. So now over here on this amazing strangler fig, we've got, again, Philodendron digitatum. This is the same one that we have growing all over the place, very wild in our kind of nursery-like spot. Little flower coming there. You can see it's quite full with pollen by the looks of it. So just one quick note on this. This is a really beautiful example of a strangler fig. So the fig itself, I think, is a Ficus virens, and it is strangling a Lophopetalum whiteanum. So strangler figs have basically worked out a kind of life hack of sorts to living in a rainforest. So basically the fig gets eaten by a bird. The bird will then deposit the seed in its shit. Am I allowed to say that? Yes, I'm allowed to say that, in its shit. Somewhere in the top of the tree. And basically the ficus has learnt that it has evolved over time to be able to send its roots down. So instead of having to grow from the bottom up in a very light restricted environment, it grows from the top down where it already has light. The other thing that allows it to do is to not invest any time in all of the strength, because the mother tree, or not the mother tree, the tree being strangled, is basically doing all of the structural work for it. So the fig can invest a lot more of its time in growing and a lot less of its time in getting rigid and strong. I think probably at some point we're going to have to do a video about that, because it's just incredibly interesting. But we're going to have to stop for now. That is the end of part 3. And we will hopefully be able to film part 4 soon. So thank you guys very much for joining us. It was a pleasure as always, and we would very much appreciate it if you could like and subscribe, and then you get to follow us on our journey and follow us through whatever forest we are in.